So here we are. Finally, the FF7 Remake is released. We are finally here right now as we speak. We are all playing it. We're all enjoying it. To some degree, some people may say differently, but for the most part, we're enjoying it. So now the question is this. How is it? And what have I thought about it? And how do I feel about it? After playing it all the way through from beginning to end in terms of the story and everything like that, I can actually say this much for sure. It was definitely an experience. It's an experience that I think we will enjoy looking forward into the future. But I can also say that after playing it, I can definitely see why there might be some people who may not even enjoy it at the slightest. There is a possibility of that actually happening, and for the people who may end up hating it, I can understand why you might hate it. But what I don't understand is why they would trash talk to other people who would love it. So guys, for this video, if you hate it, I understand you hate it. But if you hate it, don't hurt anyone because of it, or for that matter, insult anyone because they love something. Keep in mind, we're all different and we all have different personality and we all have different traits. Meaning we all have different ideals of what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy. If you don't like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I completely understand. If you enjoy it, that's great. So for this review, this is going to be what you would call more of a, I suppose, a bias review. Because while yes, I had absolute wonderful time playing through Final Fantasy VII Remake, there are some things that I will say was probably not the best parts of FF7 Remake. Also too, if you're worried about spoilers of any kind, don't worry. I'm not going to talk about anything in regards to the story until literally towards the end of the video. I will of course give out a spoiler warning to anyone whenever we get to that point, but if you feel like as if gameplay is a spoiler, then yes, click the video away and watch something else. If you've already beaten it or you just don't care and you want to know my personal thoughts and opinions, you're more than welcome to watch me talk about it. So here we are, finally reviewing FF7 Remake. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way. We're gonna go straight into the gameplay and talk about the gameplay itself. You know, we're gonna dive straight into it. And you know, we technically had the demo about 2 months before the game's release, and you know, one of the things that the demo showed off was, of course, the bombing mission. You know, it showed us the basis of the combat as well as being able to switch between characters back and forth. And so, the combat itself was interesting at first. I say at first because really it was the base combat. There was nothing else major that needed to be explained except for just how the combat was going to feel. And at first, my thoughts was that it felt weird, but it felt okay in parts. Now, a lot of people were saying that technically this feels like Kingdom Hearts, and I actually was reading, I was like, no, this is nothing like Kingdom Hearts. This is actually completely different from a Kingdom Hearts game. Because if it was Kingdom Hearts, you would have been able to actually jump in this game. In a way, though, you don't actually get to jump manually, it jumps automatically. For example, if there's like a flying enemy or some kind, your character, whenever targeting that specific enemy, will auto jump just to reach it. There are actually some enemies that will fly higher than what your character can jump, much like how Baird, or even using different spells, you can use the spells and it will target that enemy naturally. So in other words, depending on the height differential, your character will either auto jump or won't be able to target it, period. If I had to say what the gameplay was actually like, though, I would say the gameplay was similar to that of Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. Not a lot of people would probably know about this one, but only a very few people would actually know this. Crisis Core came out for the PSP, and at the time, there were a lot of Final Fantasy VII games being made. Specifically, in terms of like Final Fantasy itself, there was Crisis Core, Dres of Cerberus, and then in Japan only, there was Before Crisis involving the Turks. And then technically we had the movie Advent Children that came out, and then a few years later we had the complete edition version of it. So around that time we had a lot of FF7 games that came out. A lot of FF7 was going on during that time period. and a lot of fans spawned from there. And so if you played Crisis Core and you're playing the remake right now, you probably felt familiar with the gameplay probably. You were like, I feel like I've done this before, but it's not exactly Kingdom Hearts. It's different, you know? And that's where it was. It's actually Crisis Core. Aside from the few different gameplay aspects and stuff, the gameplay feels a little bit, the combat-wise, feels a little bit like Crisis Core. If you played Crisis Core, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And aside from the command menu versus the deck menu that was in Crisis Core, the gameplay, the battle playthrough is literally Crisis Core. That's the best way I can explain it. It's sort of like Crisis Core if you've played it. But beyond that, though, how does it feel afterwards, after playing it throughout the entire time and getting all the different materials and stuff like that? Well, I can actually say that I do actually enjoy the gameplay. Do I enjoy it better than Kingdom Hearts? No. But for what it is, it's definitely a lot nicer than I thought. I think this is the type of gameplay that I think we could actually enjoy ourselves, and I think it's a lot better than what people think it would be. Aside from the main combat itself, you also have the fact you have different abilities and spells that you can attain. But as for attaining these abilities, some of these abilities you can only attain from getting from different weapons. These different weapons, as you attain them, these particular weapons have a particular mastering bar that comes with the weapon, and these weapons will provide different abilities for each character. And with these abilities, all of them are completely different and unique in some form of way. Some are defensive, some are just straight up attacks, and some provide some kind of boost for that character per se. When you have that weapon equipped, the more you use that particular ability from that character, it will master, and then by the time you master it, even if you equip a different weapon, you'll have that ability all the time. The best way to explain this is sort of like how Final Fantasy IX did with the armor set, or for the weapon for that matter. When you equip a weapon or armor, it will have an ability attached to it, and you can activate that ability and equip it to your character. And whenever you mastered it, even if you remove the armor, that ability will be kept on your character at all times. That's the best way to explain how the ability mastery is in Final Fantasy VII Remake. But aside from mastering abilities, you also have the fact that these weapons have different mods on them. So this is going to be interesting because this kind of feels like as though as if it's a little bit like FF13, depending on how you look at it, of course. But it's like you load up the upgrading module for each individual weapon for each character, and these weapons provide you a specific boost in terms of upgrades. Either is increasing main stats like attack, defense, HP, or magic attacks, or it provides extra bonus stuff when it comes to battling circumstances, like either it increases elemental damage by a percentage, or it provides better defense when guarding, or some kind of additional bonus as well. And of course, seeing as how this is the first part, naturally any weapon you would get, you wouldn't be able to have the ability to attach materials on you, not a huge lot anyway, but as you level up your weapon, you'll be given the opportunity to where you can at least equip a module that will allow you to equip more materials as you play through the game, meaning that you can equip more materials as you go on. So this actually provides a little bit of not only interest in strategy, but also it increases your weapon usage in that particular way. In other words, there are weapons that will provide you with certain abilities, but then there are also weapons that could either provide you in terms of different stats. Like either it can be a strong hitting weapon, or it could be that it provides you with that much more material slots to where you can use the different abilities and stuff. Now, you would think that by doing this, that makes it permanent, right? Actually, no. Because technically there is a character that you can talk to, and he can actually reset it for you, for a small price, of course. But if, say for example, you have it far enough, but you've unlocked it another level to that weapon's power, as you've increased the weapon's power, you may see that there might be a different ability that you want to get, but obviously you don't have enough points. If you're near where that NPC character is, you can talk to him, and he will reset it for you, and then you can remod it for you to where you can have the abilities for you, which makes it interesting. It really does. So in other words, you had already activated an ability that you can unlock, but it has increased its level recently, and you don't have enough points, you can easily reset it and readjust it to fit your particular playstyle or your particular strategy. So it's really interesting to see this element. This wasn't in the original, you know, but it was interesting to see this being added, and I do actually like that. That makes the game that much more engaging, because the weapon increased in terms of power, and there may be a weapon in particular that you like better because of how much power it delivers, or perhaps maybe you're needing it to hold that much more materia for a better strategy to be used. And that right there alone is really good, you know, being able to provide a weapon with a series of abilities and stuff, and that makes the game much more engaging in combat. But aside from the weapons, we have to concentrate what Final Fantasy VII is known for, and that is the materia system. If anyone is familiar with FF7, you will know that materia plays a big part, such as how this remake does as well. By attaining different materials and different abilities, you have different usage for all of these different materials. And you have the base ones, like the base magic, like fire, healing, thunder, all that different stuff. But then you have additional ones, like for example, support materia, command materia, all that different stuff. These different materials provide additional support. And, you know, you would think that because this is more action-oriented, we wouldn't see that big variety of materia, right? While there isn't a lot of materia, there is a lot of different materias. And these different materias actually makes the game that much more engaging when it comes to actually using them on your party members. So there are a lot of different abilities. You have the elemental materia, which allows you to equip a elemental materia onto it. And this is done whenever there are two materia slots, but they're linked together. If they're linked together, that means it's used as a combo materia, meaning that if you have the elemental materia and you have, like, say, fire materia, this will allow you to use it. What is the elemental materia used for? It's used for, if you have it equipped on your weapon, it will deliver elemental damage to your opponent, and depending on the opponent, it can do massive damage or massive resistance. The same can be said if you're wearing it on your armor. You will have a huge resistance to fire damage if attached to your armor slots. So that makes it interesting, but there are a lot more other support materials out there. Then there's another materia which basically allows you to, as soon as you use that a particular spell materia, one of your characters, if they have that materia attached, they'll cast a spell on that target as well. Basically a combo damage, if you will. So say, for example, you're using fire magic and Barrett has that particular materia attached to lightning materia. As soon as you cast fire, he will cast lightning onto the character, so long as you have enough ATB, of course. Now, of course, next to that, you also have many other different effects that will help you in battle. Some that increase the ATB gauge, such as the ATB gauge in terms of speed, in terms of charging it. There are also other abilities that give you special stat bonuses, special resistance to debuffs and stuff. And then, of course, there's also materia, which I hadn't seen up until now, technically a auto-cure materia. Say, for example, you have it attached to Aerith with auto-cure. So long as auto-cure is linked to a healing magic materia, eventually over time, if you're in critical damage, Aerith will automatically heal you in battle. So in other words, chances are you may not have to worry about healing yourself, but there'll be a chance that maybe she could heal you automatically without you having to select it for you. But even still, it is still nice to know that you can still not only select your own abilities, but you can also select your party's abilities. So when you're in battle, you can choose to have your party members do different abilities throughout the time. So long as they're ATB gauge, so long as it's in use, you can use the abilities on the go. So in other words, say for example, you're battling monsters and stuff like that, but all of a sudden you're in terrible damage hit, you're close to dying. You can choose to have one of your characters use that ATB point and use it to cast Cure and to heal you. So it's very interesting that you can still have access to your party members. You don't have to just switch between back and forth to use abilities. You can still select the abilities from the command menu at any time. And that's really nice to know that you can easily just go from either going to Tifa or going to Barrett, whichever one's on your party, and having them to do their abilities while you're still controlling Cloud. And then of course, like I say, you can switch in between here and there. Another nice thing too is the fact that you don't always start off with Cloud. You can easily switch it up to where you can switch the party leader to be either Barret or Tifa or Aerith, depending on who's the party. Naturally, when you're exploring the world, you will always explore it as Cloud to some degree, depending on the story progression. But when you are in battle, you can choose who is going to be the party member. So say, for example, you're wanting to master different abilities for like either Barret, Aerith, or Tifa. You can easily have this switch in the battle settings to where your party leader isn't Cloud, but one of the other characters in your party. Meaning that you'll be able to start the battle with that character. Or, depending if you prefer Tifa fighting style versus Cloud's fighting style. You can have the party leader be set as Tifa at all times, and anytime you're in battle, you will start as Tifa. Now, of course, again, you'll be exploring mostly as Cloud, but you can still set the party to be whoever you want to prefer fighting as, which is very nice. It's very nice to have that. Now, of course, while we are talking about the combat, we have to remember that this takes place in the world of Final Fantasy VII. It's interesting because before FF7 Remake, we had an ideal of what the world was actually like. We had an ideal of what the world should and what was going to be looked like. Thanks to things like Advent Children, Crisis Core, and Dureza Cerberus, we already knew what the world was going to look like, and we had an ideal of what the characters had to look like. And because of the remake, it does all of that. It does extremely well in translating what was in the original game and converting it into modern day gaming. It is absolutely beautiful, absolutely breathtaking. You actually see every area that was in the original, and you can, if you've played the original, then you picture what was in the original, and then as you're playing through the area, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that, I remember all of this. And it's that sense of nostalgia. Yes, it's nostalgia blindness, but it's nostalgia at its very best. Not only that, but also too, the music tone in every different area you go to has that music tone. The composer, the music team behind this, did a fantastic job of bringing the music that was in the original and bringing it to this modern day, this advanced version of Final Fantasy VII to the remake. It's absolutely beautiful. You recognize everything. Everything that's in Final Fantasy VII Remake, it feels familiar because you've been through this technically in the original. So while it is a remake, that familiarity of Final Fantasy VII carries over into this. And that is the best part about it, is the fact that you're reliving 7 at its prime and at its best. You see every area, you see every location. It is literally almost as though as if it's like mirrored, a copy and paste, but beautifully better. It's just that much more greater. Next to that, though, you also have the fact that they've added some new stuff into it as well. Again, this is a remake, which means there are going to be some subtle changes here and there. And of those changes, the majority of them, I absolutely love. Like, I kid you not, there are actually some parts that are new technically. The stuff that are new, I absolutely love. There are stuff that I absolutely love in the remake. Now, that being said, there are times, however, though, where I felt like during the remake, I felt like there were some cases where it was a little bit elongated. Like, it overstayed its welcome. Whether it's a particular scene that was never in the original one, like as if it's like the introduction to the bandits and stuff, it's like, I felt that was unnecessary. I guess they felt like they had to in order to include it in some kind of side quest or something like that, which is okay, I guess, but really, it felt like it overstayed its welcome for a little too long. And I was actually hoping for like some kind of kick-ass punchline that Cloud would use or something like that, but no, it was just very elongated and it didn't really need to be in it. But after going through that, it immediately makes itself up by living in the world of Final Fantasy VII, living in the world of Midgar, and just experiencing how the world looks and feels. And then again, like I said, there are some scenes that do really well and just are absolutely great and amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. And those things, the things that are great, are amazing, and you will appreciate them. You will appreciate the remake just for those scenes alone. The stuff that overstay their welcome, yes, can be a hindrance on the remake itself, but for the new stuff that they added, it makes it that much more better. It makes it more enjoyable and entertaining, in my personal opinion. And that, to me, is what's going to make the remake that much more better, is moments like that. I do feel like there might be some more moments of these hindrance scenes, but as for the moments that are better and greater, those stand out better than anything else. So while there may be some moments that felt hindered or overstayed their welcome, there are a lot more scenes where you're so glad they added that on there. There's just the best parts in the game. And truly, that's the best part, is that the best parts do stand out among the hindrance ones, and that's good. But Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't an open world game. As much as people wanted it to be open world, it's not really open world. It's open linear, but it's not an open world game. You will be playing in particular parts straight through the story. It's sort of, unfortunately, kind of feels like Final Fantasy XIII in a way, where you're always going through a straight path. However, though, there are separate parts into the game where you do odd jobs. There will be 3 different segments in which where you're allowed to do these odd jobs, to where you can do different side quests and stuff of that nature. The problem, though, however, I feel, is that the side quests, much like how I said I felt like some of the scenes and moments overstayed their welcome, the side quests, specifically the odd jobs, I feel like they kind of overstayed their welcome to some degree. I didn't feel it that often, but there were definitely some moments where I was like, this probably didn't need to be added on there. Like, there were some side quests where I just felt undermined and very underwhelmed in terms of like how the side quests was dealt with. Obviously, the side quests are there not only in terms of giving you extra stuff, like different extra guild or extra items and stuff of that nature. They're technically to help you level up your character, followed by increasing your materia levels and stuff, which is perfectly sensible, it's completely understandable. But I felt like the side quests was probably unnecessary, which is, it's kind of unfortunate because there's a lot of side quests that change the progression of the story in some form of way. There are some side quests that will change how you get certain stuff and certain items, and impact the story majorly. And because of that, the side quests are kind of a hindrance, I suppose you could say, depending on how specifically you want the story to be. It's not a major story. It's not like the ending final part of Final Fantasy VII Remake where it has multiple endings. No, it's just like whatever happens towards like in the middle section of Final Fantasy VII Remake is how the side quests are affected. They don't affect the end game. They just affect the middle portion, which I'll talk about that in the story portion, but for the most part, these side quests affect that. They don't affect the main game, thankfully. So if you want to bypass the side quests, you can. It won't hurt it that one bit. But you won't have the ability to experience what it could give you, per se, if you get what I'm saying. They're not necessary, but they do contribute to some form of way in terms of story progression of some kind. So while the side quests are not really that good, once you get back into the main game, it picks back up to being a better experience. Again, much like how I said, the scenes that are good are great. The stuff that hinders it are forgettable. Much like the side quests, because the side quests themselves aren't really major, you tend to want to kind of forget the side quests and just move on to the next chapter or move on to the next main thing, because the main thing is always the better part. It feels better, it feels greater, it feels enjoyable, really. It truly does. And that's where we get into the segment of particular side quests here and there, in which where some side quests are good, some side quests are not so good. Some of the side quests that are not good are like retrieving items or trying to locate somebody and stuff like that. Those are what feels like kind of a slowdown period. The ones that do matter, though, are the ones that inquire certain battle implements and stuff like that. The biggest one involves this one NPC which asks you to do battle intel. And I highly recommend talking to him at all times. Why? Because as you get more and more battle intel for him, he gives you more different materia. And again, materia plays a big part in FF7 Remake. and he will give you different materials that can be used throughout the battle. And these different materials is insane. And the best part of this remake of any side quests is the fact that you have the ability to challenge the summons. You can fight the summons in FF7 Remake. That is the best part, in my opinion. Now, of course, we don't get to battle Infant or Chocobo Moogle, unfortunately. Those are attained it / find in the game. But you have the option to be able to attain a few other summons in the game. For example, some people have seen Shiva in the game. Well, she can't be technically found. She can be attained by this NPC. But you have to fight her. So when you fight her, then you get the ability to use the summon. So that's very nice. I love the fact that I can fight the summons in FF7 Remake. That is like the coolest thing in there. I love that. I love that too much. When I first saw that, I lost my mind and I was like, one of the things I wanted, I finally have. I'm happy now. Yes, I would like to be able to challenge Infant, but I am glad that of the summons that you get to fight them. And that's enjoyable in my personal opinion. Which, by the way, how does summons work in this game? That's something that I think a lot of people was wondering, because summon materials is actually different than how it used to work in the original, much like how the materials technically work in the game. So, when you attain a weapon, each weapon has a slot separately compared to all the other materials. That particular slot is used specifically for summon materia only. So in other words, each character that has a weapon, they will have the ability to summon a summon that they have equipped on them, or that you have equipped on them per se. So say for example, Cloud has attached Infant and Barret has attached Shiva. You can't summon them like you could in the original. They cannot be summoned normally. The only way they can be summoned, and thankfully it's not like Final Fantasy 15, where if you're in critical damage, then the summon will aid you. It is not like when you're on the verge of death. No, that's not how this works. The way the summon works is only when a critical moment happens. Now, what I mean by critical moment is that you deal critical damage in return. In other words, any type of critical moment that kicks in, so too will the summon gauge. And this summon gauge will build up after that critical moment happens, in which by the time it's filled up, so long as either you or Barret has an ATB bar filled up, you can summon whoever you want to summon. For example, like I said, Cloud Infant, Barret Shiva. If Cloud has one ATB bar, he can summon Infant. If Barret has one AT bar, he can summon Shiva. It's not specific. You can choose who you want to summon so long as you have equipped with them. And that's a cool thing too, you know, because in FF15 they were more area of effect summons, you know what I mean? Area of effect. These, however, you can equip the summon and you can choose which summon you get to choose. You don't get to summon them freely, but as soon as a moment happens where a critical damage gets hit, you can summon whoever you want to summon. It is a freedom of choice. And I feel like it's that feeling of where it's like you would want to do better to where you're dealing critical damage to the enemy, to where you can summon the summon materia on your side and do even more damage. And I think that's the interesting part, is that if you are able to implement critical damage to the enemy, you are given an extra bonus by doing more damage because of the summon. And much like the abilities, the summons have abilities points as well. So for example, you have one ATB bar, you can use a 1 ATB ability that a summon can use. If you have 2 filled, you can use the advanced one that they have as well. And that makes it really fun. You get to control the summon in battle. Not so much control their fighting style, but you get to control their abilities that they can use in battle, which is very interesting. And either you or your character that has summoned that creature dying in battle, or when their bar is completely run out, they'll still use their finisher move to do massive damage to the enemy. So that makes it really, really engaging in my personal opinion. And I think, again, everything that does well does amazingly well, and you get to enjoy every moment in this game because of all those things. Now comes the spoiler part of this. So here is your spoiler warning. Guys, if you don't want to be spoiled by the story or anything of that nature, then do not watch any further. I will have a little skip saying in the description to let you know where the ending point is. But if you don't care, or you've already played through the final parts of Final Fantasy VII Remake, then here we go. This is my thoughts on the story of the remake. So keep in mind, technically this is only for the Midgard section of this first part. What do I think of the story? What do I think of everything when it comes down to similarity to the original versus the remake? Much like how I said before, some parts in the remake do extremely well. The parts that are great are amazing. But there are some cases where it does feel like it's overstayed its welcome. It's sort of a hindrance towards that specific stuff. There have been moments where I felt like that. There were moments where I felt like that it was unnecessary and that they felt like they had to do it in order to expand it. At first, it started off as like a scene or two, in which case I thought to myself, oh, these are easily skippable. So this isn't a major difficult problem. This is just, it's an annoyance, but it's not a major annoyance. Then I encountered one or two chapters where I felt like it was unnecessary. You know, and that's the weird part. It's the weird part, because of those things that I felt like was unnecessary, it was a big time during this moment. I won't say what chapter, but there's a specific chapter where I felt like that was unnecessary. There was a specific part in Genuine, and I felt like that kind of would hurt the experience a little bit, and I felt like that was definitely not necessary towards like the end product, and I felt like that could have easily been avoidable, but I guess I can understand in terms of making it a better experience or expanding on certain subjects and stuff. I guess it would make sense. I also hate the fact that technically you don't get to play as Red 13 during this point. When you get farther in the game and you have Red 13 on your side, you don't actually get to play as him. And that I felt like that was very poorly done. I felt like we should have at least had a chance to have a taste of Red 13. Then again, keep in mind, that's like towards the very end of the game anyway. So by that point, even if you could play as Barrett, there's not much you can do with him. He wouldn't have any major weapons available. He wouldn't have a major ability or anything like that. He would just be Red 13 with like one weapon perhaps and stuff like that. So I can understand why they didn't make him playable, but I would have really enjoyed playing as Red 13, and it's a shame that we won't get to play as Red 13 until Part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake. One small tidbit, though, that I do want to say before we end the review, and that is the final parts. I don't normally talk about the final boss, but to kind of briefly talk about it without actually giving spoilers, which is the hardest part, really, and trust me when I say this, it will feel like a spoiler, but in reality, I'm not really showing what it is. So, the final parts, after dealing with the bike boss fight, you know, whenever Cloud and them are driving on the highway, and you're having to fight this boss creature and stuff like that, which, by the way, I love the bike missions. I love these two things. Technically, when you beat the game, you have the option to where you can skip the bike missions, but in my personal opinion, I think that's like the funnest part. I had more fun playing on these bike missions, because most of the time when they do something like a Segway type play style or something like that, it doesn't really work. Sometimes it doesn't feel right, but the bike missions are the funnest part of those moments. I think they did really well when it comes down to it. Is it a little hard to control at times? It could feel like that in certain critical moments, but reality is that they are fun, entertaining, and enjoyable. Trust me, they are just the best that you could possibly get, too. Naturally, though, the final part was a little weird. Like, it's very weird of how, like, this particular segment was just weird on its own, you know. It technically involves a new add-on that they've added called the Whispers. The way they've explained it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They say they control the wills of fate, meaning that whatever it is fated, the Whisper guides the way to prevent destiny from changing and stuff. And it's like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because as you're watching it, you feel like as though as if the Whispers are siding towards Sephiroth. Yet, if they were siding towards Sephiroth, they would have had certain key characters die, and instead, the Whispers keep them alive. And it's like, that's counter-opportunist, isn't it? It's like, it doesn't really make sense right now. I'm sure the Whispers play a big part, but really, for the time being right now, they play a weird, annoying, like, I don't know, they play a weird part in the story, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In fact, really, explaining the Whispers just doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. It's like as though as if, the best way I can explain it, it's like as though as if fan fiction writers in the actual material world, where the people in that story are trying to tempt fate, but the fanfic writer basically says, no, this is how it works. And it's like, no, we don't want this person to die, so they'll heal them or revive them and stuff, or keep them safe. But then if it's like trying to defeat the main bad guy and stuff, no, they'll stop them at all costs. And it's like, it's a weird counterpart, and it's like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? You know? I feel like the Whispers was like the biggest part to me, was like what didn't make sense to me at all. Really, it doesn't. But as for the final battle, I'm a little mixed. Like, on the one hand, I thought it was weird, but on the other hand, I kind of liked it. It was actually pretty interesting to some degree. But then after that part comes like a major final part, and I won't say what it is, but I like it. I really, really like it. Technically, it's not even supposed to happen, but I like it. I really like it. It's an interest. Again, I'm trying not to spoil it too major. I may have spoiled it a little bit too much at this point, but I really like the final boss. I really do actually like it. You know, again, the stuff that stands out that are great are amazing, and the stuff that you feel like didn't really need to be in there feels more like a hindrance. So it's kind of like a teeter-totter balance of like really good and amazing, awesome stuff to meh. You know, it's weird. It's a very weird way that they went with this remake. I don't know if the Whispers are going to carry through onto part 2. I imagine they would, but if they don't, I want to know why they were only in the Midgar section, because again, without giving out any major spoilers, it seems like they are only in Midgar, nothing else afterwards. So it's weird. I don't know what the purpose is of the Whispers. Depending on how they want to go about the story, may depend on how we could experience the story of FF7 Remake. Who's to say, really? So, without further ado, we now come to the part of Final Fantasy VII Remake where I have to give it a rating. Now, again, this is going to be a little bit biased. I know a lot of people are going to be like, as much criticism as I've already given out. I also praise it heavily. There's a lot of amazing stuff that I love out of the remake. I love the different stuff that they've added on there. I love the combat, the new stuff they did. I love it to death. I love the story. I love the atmosphere. I love the music. I love everything. Everything that I love it to an overwhelming amount. To the stuff that I don't like, I say to myself, I still love the better stuff, you know? The better stuff does well. You get what I'm saying? Yes, there's some bad parts, but the better parts stands up a most. And it's like, you know what? I will play through it again just to enjoy it that much more further, you know? It's like, to experience Final Fantasy VII Remake, you gotta go through the bad just as much as you go through the good. So, for this review, I am giving Final Fantasy VII Remake a 4 out of 5 star. Again, because of the fact that there's a lot of bad stuff, there's a lot of stuff that kind of reduces value, and I can understand why people hate it. But there's a lot of stuff that is so belovedly loved that I can understand why there's so many people who would enjoy it. There's so much good stuff in it. The stuff that suck, I can understand why people hate it. The stuff that are amazing, I can understand why it's so loved. So that's why it's getting a 4 out of 5. Not everyone is going to love it, and for hardcore fans, I think there might be some people who will hate it, but there's going to be just as many, if not more, people who are going to love this. This is an experience that we are in for the long run. This is just the first part. So, depending on how they do the second part from here on out, We're just waiting at this point. But it's really good. So the best thing that I can say right now, if you feel like you're going to love FF7 Remake, you will enjoy the living heck out of this one. If you feel like you wouldn't like it, then you don't have to worry about getting it, because chances are the stuff that stands out to being bad, you may hate it. But the stuff that you want to experience, that you would enjoy, you're going to love it. Trust me. So it's one of those things. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the whole thing? But to me, FF7 Remake was well worth it, well worth the wait, and it was just enjoyable. So, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Catch you guys later.
Damn! That was too close. We need to come up with a plan.
Go in it!
You